Good evening and welcome to the 9th presentation for the 2023-24 season of Avalanche Canada's webinar series. My name's Sarah Taylor and I'm your producer this evening. Lisa Perizzolo is our moderator and she'll be helping with helpful links in the box and also looking out for your questions in the Q&A box. We're excited to be here to continue sharing some great presentations with you this evening. Over the last 3 years, we presented a variety of webinars and found that being online means we get to share our avalanche safety messaging with even more of you than before. We're stoked you're with us this evening, and we always appreciate you sharing these webinars with others who might enjoy them. Our mission is to help educate backcountry users so they can go out and play safe. We want you to know more, go further, and come home. First, we'd like to acknowledge that our session is being hosted on the territory of 4 nations, the Sinixt, Secwepemc, Ktunaxa, and Syilx. As a national organisation, we also acknowledge the First Nation, Métis and Inuit nations on whose land we live and recreate. Before we start tonight, we'd like to recognise some of our sponsors. We're very grateful for our sponsors' loyal support and for their work in helping us reach backcountry users this winter. We have our government partners, our programme partners, our affiliations, our premier sponsors, our contributors, and this webinar tonight is sponsored by Garmin. Garmin have been a dedicated supporter of public avalanche safety in Canada for many years. They provide in-reach devices that are indispensable for tools for our field teams during the winter, and these devices serve as an important safety and communication tool for our field teams. The 6 teams use them to track their trips, for emergency communications, and to provide forecasters with real-time updates about conditions from the field. So thank you, Garmin, for helping keep our field teams safe and for keeping the public safe too. Just a couple of notes to share before we get started. Everyone will be automatically muted. There'll be an opportunity to ask questions, and to do so, you can either use the raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, so I can unmute you and you can ask a question live, or you can use the Q&A box, which is found also at the bottom of your screen. If you've got questions, try and pop them in the Q&A box over the chat. Lisa will be dropping links in that chat box, and we don't always see the questions through the links that she shares. Stick around till the end tonight, because we're going to be pulling some awesome little prizes from Mammut. Tonight's presentation is Navigation 101, using digital tools. We'll be looking at some of the digital tools that are available to help plan your trip before you head out into the backcountry, and some of the tools that you can use to help you go when you're out in the terrain. There are quite a few digital mapping tools available, and we probably won't get to cover them all in detail, but we do hope to give you a taste of some of the options available and how the tools might make your adventures safer and more enjoyable. Our presenters for this evening are Lisa Larson and Marshall Damster. Lisa's an Avalanche Canada forecaster and also the lead field technician for our South Rockies team. She's worked for AvCan for 8 years, and she also instructs AST courses and professional level courses for the Canadian Avalanche Association. Marshall is a level 3 CMBGA guide, an avalanche forecaster and educator. He primarily works for Frozen Pirate Snow Services out of Valemount, BC, and he's also currently sitting on the board of directors for the CMBGA. Marshall spent his shoulder seasons touring all across the country, leading the BRP Avalanche Outreach Program. And if you do have one of them near you and you're a sledder, highly recommend them. They're free sessions, anyone can go, really great tool. As professionals in their field, both Lisa and Marshall use these tools to help them with their trip planning and route choices every time they go out. The apps we're going to talk about tonight are going to include Garmin, Gaia, Caltopo, Google Earth, AvCan's own trip planner, BRP Go, and the Polaris Ride Command. And there are so many more out there. We'll do our best to cover the basics of some of those, and we'll also look at some skills that you can transfer whatever app you use. We'd love to hear any questions you've got during the presentation, so please feel free to ask them in that Q&A box. So without further ado, I will ask Lisa and Marshall to turn on their cameras, and we have a couple of polls to get us started for tonight. So I think the first poll is launched. It's hard for me to see. So the first one is about how much training you have. So we just want to know a little bit about who we're talking to and kind of skills you already have. Awesome. So looking like we've got lots of people who've got that brilliant AST1, some people with an AST2, a couple of people with professional training, and some people just starting out. So awesome, good spread. Nice mix of people. Okay. Next, sorry, I can't actually see what you can see. So our next poll we're going to ask about how we get around in the backcountry. So what your preferred mode of travel is. Lots of skiers straight off the bat. Some snowshoers, hikers. Nice, got some snowmobilers too. Snow bikers. Oh, ice climber. Awesome. Oh, a few ice climbers actually. Nice. Okay, so it's looking like we've got mostly ski and board, a few snowmobilers and snow bikers, a couple of snowshoers, and some ice climbers. Awesome. Fantastic. Okay, and the last question we got for you tonight, just so we can get an idea of what skills you already have. We'd like to know what apps you already use. So if that poll's not up yet, it will be shortly. What kind of digital tools you already use for getting around in the backcountry? Nice. Lots of people using Gaia. We're definitely going to talk about Gaia tonight. Lots of people using Garmin as well. We'll be talking about that and FatMap. Google Earth. Oh, nice to see lots of people using the AvCan trip planner too. And some people starting from scratch. So that's awesome. This would be a great session for you to learn the basics. Okay, so we've got lots of people using Garmin and Gaia and FatMap. A couple of people using CalTopo. Don't have anyone using the BRP or Polaris yet, but maybe we can talk you into that this evening. Got some Google Earth users and some trip planner users, as well as some people starting fresh. Awesome. Okay, so without further ado, I will stop sharing my screen and get out of your hair and leave the experts to it.
Okay, is that looking all good?
Yeah,
looks good, Lisa.
Okay, thank you.
I'll bow out. Lisa's gonna go first.
Okay, hello everyone. I'll get started here with our presentation, Navigation 101, using digital tools. Just quickly, I'm going to go over the kind of what it's going to look like for the presentation. So first of all, we're going to answer that question, what are digital tools? And then we're going to dive into how to use digital tools to plan your trip. And as Sarah said, we're going to go through a spattering of each of these tools. So the AvCan trip planner, pairing that with Google Earth, how to use Google Earth for trip planning, and then also the FatMap, Gaia, and CalTopo. Once we kind of look through that, we're gonna, Marshall's gonna start looking at using digital tools in the field. And then he's gonna talk a bit about Ride Command and the BRP Go navigation systems on Polaris and BRP. And then we would be remiss to not talk about transceiver interference along with all of these electronics that we're talking about that we want to make sure people are aware of. So we're going to end off with that before we get to questions. So what are digital tools? So there are many different tools that could fall into the digital tools category. So we have mapping apps, and we can use them on either our desktop or mobile or both. Smartwatches also fit into this, that people are using these to navigate, to track routes, and they're also using this to track different fitness parameters. And then lastly, the satellite communication devices. So this is like the Garmin InReach or the Zoleo emergency communicator. And these are used for emergency call out, communication to friends and family, and then also can be used for basic navigation when you pair them with your iPhone or with a smartphone. So all of these fit into our backcountry kit somewhere, but today we are mainly going to be focusing on the digital tools for mapping. So I'm going to kind of frame this part of the presentation around the daily process. So the daily process is a framework that we use for proactive planning. And we're going to look at how using these digital tools can support planning your trip. But we're going to really start with step one, getting the forecast, because we want to make sure that we have an idea of what's going on with avalanche problems and avalanche hazard before we step into planning our trip. So with the first step being get the forecast, we want to plan our trip around avalanche hazard. It's a proactive way to eliminate the risk by simply not going to an area where you'll be exposing yourself to the current avalanche problem. So this is a screenshot of the Avalanche Canada trip planner that you can find in the resources tab at avalanche.ca. And when you open that resource, the trip planner off of the website there, what will happen is it'll open you up to a full map. And then you need to scroll into the different polygons. And so most of the popular snowmobile routes, ski touring routes have been AITS terrain rated, and you can find them there. This is just an example of an area around where I live down by the Crow's Nest Pass. This is a place called Coco Claims. It's a snowmobiling area. Using the trip planner, it really takes the guesswork out of adding the avalanche hazard to a specific area that you're going to. And for instance, so when you kind of scroll into one of these areas, you can see right away some of the things that you will learn about in a AST1, and that's the avalanche terrain exposure scale, or AITS. What's showing here is the different levels. So the green is showing simple terrain, the blue is showing challenging terrain, and black is representing complex terrain, and the red lines are avalanche paths. So what automatically happens when you use a trip planner is it places you in your region and provides the avalanche hazard rating for that region. So in this example here, on the day that I did this screenshot, the avalanche hazard rating for the region that Coco Claims falls in was at considerable. And I decided that I wanted to travel this access route that's this yellow line. And that required me to go into this challenging terrain, just a thin blue section of challenging terrain here. So when you click in that blue part of the polygon there, it automatically places me on the evaluator for the trip planner. And so you can see here that at a considerable hazard rating and that terrain is challenging, it puts me in extra caution. So it's kind of an easy way to already kind of understand what the avalanche hazard is, and then identify where you want to go based on that avalanche hazard. But we want to try and take it even a step further than that. So looking at the specific avalanche problems that we have that you can find in the forecast. So the avalanche forecast provides a ton of information about each specific avalanche problem. For example, here I clipped just 3 different avalanche problems, and they each will provide what elevation band that problem exists at, what slopes that avalanche problem is on, what the chances of an avalanche are, and then also the expected size. So we're gonna look at some of the digital tools and how we can use digital tools to look even closer at the terrain we're interested in going to. So a very handy tool for visualizing terrain is Google Earth. So specifically the satellite imagery but also the ability to tilt and pan, scroll in and out are extremely helpful for giving a visual idea of the terrain you're planning to take your trip in. So again, a really nice thing about Google Earth is you can download the polygons from the trip planner, from the Avalanche Canada trip planner, and then upload them into Google Earth. So it actually provides more information and ability to kind of look at terrain even closer than you could when we were just in the trip planner. And so in this example, I have attached this wind slab problem. And so when we're looking at this wind slab in particular, it's saying what elevation. So when we're looking here, it's saying that the wind slab problem is in the Alpine. And so now I can look at the terrain that I want to travel in and start to identify some Alpine terrain. So Alpine terrain is defined as open slopes with no trees. And it's pretty easy to identify some of that in the satellite photos. So here you can see along this area here, there's a lot of Alpine terrain. There's some in the background as well. The next part that we're looking at when we think about an avalanche problem is what slopes is the avalanche problem on? So this wind slab problem is basically on all aspects except for true west-facing slopes. So again, this piece of Alpine terrain that we were looking at earlier, if you look up here, you can see that the top of the page is north. And so this Alpine feature right here is facing east and northeast. So again, now we can really like hone in on this avalanche problem. So if we were thinking of going up into this Mirror Lake area, we would be expecting that that wind slab problem is here. And then looking at the chance of likelihood, that just gives you a little bit more information that it's unlikely or possible, and that the avalanche size is small, from 1 to 1.5. So if we did decide to go and play in this simple terrain, we might be looking out for this avalanche that might impact this simple terrain. But because it's like a wind slab in the Alpine, we might just be able to use good group management skills and be able to travel within this terrain by potentially going one at a time. And so that's a way to do that. The next avalanche problem that we're going to look at is a wet loose avalanche problem. And so this one's a little bit different, where it is on all elevations, so alpine tree line and below tree line, and on all slopes. It's also very likely, and the size of avalanche is large, from 2.5 and pushing up into the size 3. So I'm not really sure what this day is from, but it was from the spring last year. So I'm suspicious that it's a precipitation event, not really a solar or sun event, because it's affecting all elevations and all aspects. So thinking about going all the way into this Mirror Lake area, we actually have to pass by this area right here. And so this is the access road. And you can see that there's 3 or 5 large avalanche paths that impact that road there. So just zooming in on that, for this wet, loose avalanche problem that's very likely with a size 2.5, all aspects, all elevations, an avalanche is likely to reach the access road on this day. One of the tools that you can use in Google Earth is to measure path length. And so I just went ahead and measured this, and this is just a screenshot where it talks that this avalanche path is about 850 meters. And so when we look at a size 2.5 to size 3, that's kind of in the area where we're looking at. Just a quick disclaimer on that. This type of measuring avalanche paths should just be used for getting a better understanding of terrain, not really to thread the needle. There's often times when size 1.5, size 2s can run really far and fast. And so it doesn't mean that, you know, if this was only 800 meters, size 3, that it wouldn't impact here. So just a disclaimer there for that. But it is a tool to help kind of get a better understanding of avalanche runout. But thinking back to the wind slab, for this wind slab problem that's possible, size 1.5, all aspects but west, that also could be a problem in this terrain as well. So an alpine feature, that it is also a southeast facing slope. But in this example, using these type of managing risk things that come up at this decision point, regrouping one at a time, spreading out, traveling in this area with the wind slab problem seems reasonable for that type of problem, where with the wet loose avalanche problem, this would probably be a day when I would not choose to go to this terrain at all. And then just a quick, you can add this information to the Google Earth mobile app, but I don't have too much to say about that. And I have heard that it's kind of unreliable in the backcountry. So if any of you have any experience with that, please feel free to add that into the chat. Okay, so now that we've kind of looked at the avalanche forecast, now we're kind of moving into this sort of plan your trip. And so here we can see there's just, now that we've been able to plan our trip, I'm just going to create a route in this area using the 8s rated terrain here. So going through here, starting at the staging area, traveling up through the road. I've decided not to go underneath those avalanche paths. So I'm going to go into an area over here that avoids that. And then I'm going to save this route onto my computer so that I can use it later on in one of my apps that I'm going to use to go out into the backcountry. Okay, so now we're into this plan your trip. So we've got the forecast, and now we're starting to think about, okay, we want to plan our trip and then be able to take this trip plan out into the field with us. So there's several different digital tools that can be used for planning your trip, and each of them is going to have their pros and cons. Each one of these has various tools that are available in the free version, but many of them work much better and provide extended services using the paid versions. We're going to briefly talk about all 3 of the ones on the left here. So FatMap, Gaia, and CalTopo. I'm familiar with all 3 of these and welcome any questions that you have at the end of the session about the specific of each of these apps. Okay, so at the first part of this presentation, we looked at an area that already had terrain ratings and how we could use Google Earth to plan a route, avoiding avalanche problems and sticking terrain, the fits and conditions of the days using 8s terrain rated areas from Avalanche Canada's trip planner. Now we're going to look at how to use digital tools to plan a trip where there are no 8s terrain ratings. So in this image, I'm using the CalTopo satellite imagery, and each one of the apps that I'm talking about, FatMap, Gaia, and CalTopo, all have some satellite imagery that can be used. What I like to look at when I'm looking at satellite imagery is kind of to start to go back to that avalanche problems piece and start to identify alpine, tree line, and below tree line terrain. So as we said earlier, alpine terrain is open expanses of terrain with no trees. Tree line elevation is characterized by sparse forest cover. It's that transition between alpine and then below tree line, which is the elevation band of a mountain or range that is covered by forest. So even in this really zoomed out image here on CalTopo using the satellite imagery, we can identify alpine terrain, we can identify below tree line terrain, and in some places, even though it's very zoomed out here, we can start to identify some tree line terrain. So kind of right away, we can already start to picture where some of the avalanche problems might be from the avalanche forecast specifics. Next, satellite imagery is also really useful for identifying avalanche paths that may impact your route, and specifically looking for runout zones. So in this example here, you can see there's a classic runout zone here that's shown by, a lack of trees, a very large start zone and a track, and then the runout. And there's a number of those throughout here. So one of the things I like to look for with runouts specifically is that if you're just using slope angle shading, it's only going to show you where the terrain is of a start zone. So avalanche terrain at start zone incline between 28 and 45 degrees, but it doesn't really show you where, if that avalanche was to go, how far it would run and the runouts of those avalanches. So this is why I like to make sure I'm kind of looking at and looking for these areas. There's a few over here as well. And then another resource that you can get in the FatMap app is fly-through. So it just gives you a general idea of the route, so you can start to visualize the terrain before you even get there. So I just sped this up, but obviously you're traveling below tree line for a good portion of this area, and then you start to open up into a big bowl there. So that's kind of a nice feature, and Google Earth has a similar feature as well. Okay, next, after I've looked at the satellite imagery, then now I've added a slope angle shading layer. Again, this shading layer is available in each of the apps. So FatMap, Gaia, and CalTopo all have a slope shading layer that can be added on. This particular one is in Gaia, and in Gaia, you can only get the slope angle shading layer in the paid version, whereas you can see it in FatMap in the free version. Another thing that I've added here is not only the slope angle shading, but also the contours, and I'll talk about that in a second. Using slope angle shading, I do want to talk a little bit about that. It is good for identifying avalanche terrain on a macro scale. And typically we're traveling in the mountains on what would be more of a micro scale, so small slopes. And so we want to think about it in that way. There's an article that's going to be linked in the chat, and it's called "Do You Know What Your Map Knows?" It's an excellent resource for better understanding the limitations of the slope angle shading layers. And they use an analogy in that article that I really liked, and it's to use the slope angle shading similar to how you would use snowpack information. So if you read the snowpack summary in the details tab of the avalanche forecast, it's going to talk to a general information about the snowpack in the region. And then when you go to an area, you need to assess on the ground the differences from the snowpack summary that you've read to the point snowpack data that you're seeing under your foot. And the same can really be said for a slope angle shading. Really, this layer is only as good as the surface that it is used to create that layer. And currently in Canada, this layer has a resolution of 25 meters. And some areas may be different, and it is getting better. Like in the United States, many areas have a slope resolution of 9 meters. So the important thing to know is that a lot of information can be lost or missed in this 25 meters. And specifically, the thing that's most important in avalanche terrain is terrain traps. And so you can imagine that there's quite a bit of terrain, and especially micro features that would be lost in 25 meters. So we don't have all the time to talk about digital elevation models, but it is critical that you recognize that slope angle shading must be verified in the field. So one way to do this is to make sure that you are checking slope angles often and calibrating yourself to the slope angles between 28 and 45 degrees. That would be categorized as areas where slab avalanches can initiate or are most likely to initiate. Okay, so now we have the satellite imagery. Now we've talked about the slope shading. And then lastly, I just want to talk about contour lines. So adding contour lines and knowing how to read contour lines is super helpful to further identify terrain features. So the difference you can see in these two pictures. So on the one on the left, I just have the satellite imagery with the slope angle shading. And then the one on the right, I have the contour lines added. And if you look at this area in particular here, it's really hard to identify what's going on here. Really, it just looks like a flat surface. Even when you have it kind of tilted screen, it's hard to see what's going on there. Whereas when you look over here, you can start to see that it's a broad ridge that goes into this gully feature where there's a creek. And then there also is another ridge kind of that goes up here onto the left of this slope angle shading where it's a little bit steeper. So one of the recommendations for good travel habits is to use high ground. So contour lines really help to find ridge features that don't show up with satellite imagery with just the slope angle shading. Okay, so now that we sort of got through all of that, now we actually want to create our routes for the field. So I'm just gonna play through, this is CalTopo, and basically creating a route up this ridge feature to the top, that's the ski up, and then the descent route down. Each one of these tools is gonna have a way to create routes, and it's essentially just adding points that creates a line. And then once you've created this line, if you're creating this line in the app that you're going to be using in the field, all you need to do is just make sure that you sync this to your phone. So you've been creating this on your desktop, and now you want to have it on your mobile device so you can take it out into the field. So you want to make sure that it's synced. Or if you are creating it on a desktop in a different app, say Google Earth, for instance, that doesn't have a mobile app, you need to export it and then save it to your computer and then import it into your app of choice. And then one thing quick just to add about that is that Google Earth strictly uses a KML format, and FatMap exclusively uses a GPX format. And so those don't talk to one another. But the nice thing about Gaia and CalTopo is they will import and export any of those file formats. So they are kind of a nice resource for that. And they are a good resource for translating a KML file to a GPX if you need to. And you can use that to upload into your Garmin device. So Garmin device likes the GPX file format as well. And then this is just because I created this route in CalTopo, I just made sure I synced it on my phone. and now I'm ready to go out into the field. Before I do that, though, you need to download the maps to use offline. And so you need to have all of these routes that you've created downloaded on the maps downloaded onto your phone so you can use them offline. This is a screenshot example of the Gaia. So save offline maps. Then you're going to choose the layers. You're going to verify that you have the maps downloaded. And this just makes sure that you have the data that you would like, the layers, while you're offline and out of service and using your phone in airplane mode. A couple just other things to add before I switch it over to Marshall here is in CalTopo, you can create trip plans that actually have legs, and they will use the Munter system to figure out the timing of your trip. And so you can see here, I have 3 legs to my trip. And the first is a sled access, a ski tour is the second one. So ascent, and then a ski descent. And so it just actually calculates the whole trip for you, basically in a click of a button. So you can share that, and it gives you an idea of when you need to have turnaround times. The other thing that you can do in CalTopo is you can print PDF maps. So you can create a map that you can use as a backup, and you can set this so that you can have the UTM lines in there. And then what you have is a printed map that actually can be used with a compass as well, so that you can, if you lose the battery power in your phone and you need a backup system, you're carrying a compass, and then you actually have your own printed map here. And then lastly, another backup, many people are using Garmin InReach device, and you can add these routes to your Garmin, and they're kind of a backup navigation system if you pair your InReach to your phone. And so it's just another way to make sure you have all of your information out there in the field. So thank you. And I'm going to switch it over to Marshall now, where he's going to talk a bit more specifically about using these digital tools in the field.
Thanks, Lisa. That was awesome. You just give me a second here. I'm going to try and share my screen. Let's see. Does that look like you can see my screen?
Yeah, it looks great.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. So, I mean, Lisa, that was amazing. There are so many tools that are available to us. I want to talk a little bit about some of the more sled specific ones, and then I'll jump into some stuff that is kind of for everyone after that. So, we have the pleasure on our snow machines to have some factory equipped options. So there are options that are available right out of the box that work on your screen on the sled, which I think is really, really cool. There are also aftermarket and handheld versions of those. And then last but certainly not least, we can use our phones, right? The comfort of our own phone. So I want to talk a little bit about the BRP Go app and the Polaris Ride Command. The Rhino GPS, the Ride Command, and the Trail Tech, they all kind of work the same. The BRP Go is a little bit different. And based on the poll at the start, I don't think that many people know about these. So if you're a skier, you should be jealous after we're finished talking about this. So some of the features of the BRP Go app, which is again on the screen, it has pre-programmed maps in it, similar to what a Gaia would have, or the Garmin's inReaches have. It's maybe not as quite in great detail. It's still a very usable map, but it's I mean, little bit to be desired, I suppose. It has pre-programmed trails, the shelters. It also has the ability to show you on a map. So you, as you're out there in the field, it will show where you go. Unfortunately, with the BRP Go one specifically, you have to have connection to your phone. So you have to have your phone plugged into your screen to make that happen. Um, Similar to the Gaia ones, both of those require us to download a section. So you choose a section of the map when you're in service, and that will allow you to download that onto your phone, and then you can take that into the backcountry on your screen. Let's see. I want to talk about the ride command and the Garmin Rhino product as well as the Trail Tech. They do a couple extra things, which I think is really neat. It allows you to track your position, which most of the options we're talking about today do, but these ones specifically allow you to track your friends' progress on there. So I've never really run into many issues with having to track my friends when I'm skiing, but we switched to snowmobiles. It's really nice to know where your friends are in the world. That's done through a radio frequency. So that's a common misconception. I've heard and had this discussion a few times with a bunch of people and a couple last night actually, where people are thinking that it's actually a satellite signal that's being sent out to the satellite and then coming back to your satellite device. And that's how it's double sending basically. That only happens with a paid service. So this Ride Command and the Trail Tech and the Garmin aren't actually a paid service. So they use a radio frequency, which is borrowed from that technology exists in the marine world. So that's how when you're out on your boat, you have your Garmin product that's your dash or whatever, and they will show a location based on radio frequencies. So there's some shortcomings to this as well when we're traveling around. The biggest one that I've found and I've noticed is it's about as good as your strong two-way radio. So if you find yourself with some topography or some mountain peaks in between you, you will actually lose the track of that person. So it only works within that radio frequency. Garmin's and the Trail Techs both, you can actually load other maps on there, so that GPX file, and take that with you in the field, which is really, really cool. There's an example, a little close up of the real-time tracking. So that's from our ride today. So we can see Evan was laying down lots of tracks today, and then he is the arrow, and our other partner that has the ride command is the X there, so we could see where that person is at all times. So if we end up losing radio service, um, or his radio dies, something happens, we want to try and figure out exactly where he is. That's the ability to do that is there, which is really cool. You can have that be public, so everyone that has that technology can see you in the field, or you can actually shut it off to just a private group and invite just your partners in there. So a few different options. I did some research with some of the new sleds that are coming out. So Arcticat is producing a new platform for next year for 2025, and they have actually sourced out their gauges to Garmin. So the full snowmobile cluster is going to be a Garmin product, and it will have all of those abilities to have two-way communication, including voice or text between the snowmobiles when you're out of service and in the backcountry, which I thought that was pretty cool. I haven't touched that in real life yet. I'm not sure. I don't know anyone that has. So that is stolen directly from the internet. So hopefully the Arcticat people don't get mad at me. You get what you give with this though. So yeah, you have to put a little bit of time and effort. And I know Lisa spoke really well to this. The trip planning tool is a really amazing tool. Also, the snowmobile clubs have really great products out there as well. So you can actually download a bunch of things. This is Allen Creek, so in my neck of the woods, we can get the GPS file, we can get the Google Earth file for the riding zone, as well as the maps, and we can download the AITS ratings directly from that website as well. So I have had a great battle with Google Earth. So if you're able to take that KMS file and download it onto your phone, if you open up your Google Earth app on your phone it will show you in real time with the 8's ratings where you are in the world. So you can actually use that to some level for some navigation. You can use that for referencing, where some slide paths are. You can also use that to become familiar with what those 8's ratings are. Um, and I'm wondering if others have had, I know Lisa asked the question, I'll ask it too, if anyone's actually tried to do this a bunch. I know I've had some success with it, but I've also had it fail me a few times, so it's not super reliable. For me, if I plug in my phone into my screen on my snowmobile, it drops me. I no longer have the ability to see me on the Google Earth if I'm trying to use the Google Earth. So, and no, just for the record, it doesn't show up as Google Earth on my screen. That's something that maybe we should talk to the manufacturers about. The other really cool thing that I use very often is to have that file that's downloaded onto my phone. I can then ask it to be brought up into the GPS, and it will actually show me the area boundaries. And I know that's an important thing in a lot of places in the world, where we need to be able to stay within our riding areas. It's obviously super important to to not be in the closures. So this is a really good way for you to know exactly where you are in the world. So this is shown in Gaia. So I've opened up the file from the Avalanche Canada trip planning tool, and I've asked Gaia to open that up. And I've just asked it to open up the area boundaries, so not necessarily the 8's ratings on this one. If I expand that out to my bigger map, that's what my sledding zone would look like. And there's some things I want to zoom in on here. So we will go into this one here, which has the different overlays that I have the options for. So when I'm out in the backcountry, I often use the topographic winter map. I feel like that this serves me very well. It allows me to see where I am in the world when we're out there, but it also gives me a reference with those contour lines. As Lisa said earlier, it's really important to sort of understand how challenging it is to sometimes recognize the slope angles and whatnot. I've definitely got about a D- in that a few times, trying to go down a drainage looking like I was maybe be rideable, and it turns out it was actually quite a bit steeper than we anticipated it. So it's kind of like a trial and error thing that you will get used to, I suppose. The next one I want to talk about, specific on the Gaia, is you can have people lay down public tracks. So they're not, I think, often aware that they're laying down their public tracks, but that gives you the ability to, when you're in the field, see where the highways are in the riding zone. So these are all the highways. These are tracks that other people have laid. So this is the same area where I'm riding here. And you can actually see it actually gives you direction as well. So I think that's a pretty neat feature that Gaia has available. And if you don't want people to see your secret honey hole, I would recommend turning off the public track function if you're tracking yourself. So how do we actually use this in the field? There's a lot of different ways that I would use it in the field. First and foremost, if I'm going to a new zone, doing that pre-trip stuff is super important and very well, it's very important. The stuff that we're using, the technology that we're using when we're out there, it doesn't work unless you do that pre-trip stuff. So once you're out there, you can actually lay tracks down. So you can put the breadcrumbs down, and that will allow you to uh, basically track your route. And if you need to, you can use that when if we're faced with like a whiteout navigation type scenario. So if you've found your way out, your way, 2 or 3 bowls back, and a storm pulls in, you've done maybe a bad job of your trip planning because you're way out there and you're being stormed in or fogged in. You can actually go back to your GPS or your Gaia or your phone, and you can look at where you've been and the route that you normally could go. It's also, you know, that's a challenging thing to do. So to solely navigate with only being able to see a couple feet in front of you, based off of a GPS or off your phone, is something that is really quite challenging, especially on a snow machine. So in my past experience and the tips that I can give for that is make sure you're not solely relying on just that. Make sure that you have the ability to um, to to try and find your way back home. But if you are faced with that, we actually ended up shutting our machines off often. So we won't try and hold the phone up and then try and drive my snowmobile. I'll walk a certain section um, using the GPS, come back, grab the group, travel a little bit further, and continue that process over and over again. The other way, which is very, very usable in my opinion, is we actually used it today. So we went into a new area for the year. So we hadn't been into that area yet this year. The conditions hadn't been right until today. So we got some sunshine, but there's actually a very technical way to get into this zone. So we were able to come back to our tracks from previous years where we'd been and cut through. And I'm sure there's some people that are wondering, well, you're supposed to be this big, hotshot guide. How come you didn't know exactly where it was? It looks substantially different this year. I'm surprised at how different the areas look when we're missing, a fair amount of snow from years past. So it was nice to be able to have that in the field, to be able to go back and reference. There's a few must hit points on this route, so we were able to, travel along, reference our map, and figure out exactly where we were in the world, and it worked very, very well. So for me, some things to consider. Let's see if I can do that. That's better. So some things to consider. So if you're going to do that, if you want to have the ability to navigate back following your tracks, you have to make sure that you're turning it on. You don't want to be turning these things on when you need them, because that won't have laid down the breadcrumbs for you to actually follow back. You can't get caught with the dead battery. There are multiple different ways. In my world, I have a plug-in in my snowmobile, but even that might not serve me well. If we, let's say we end up losing a snowmobile or get stuck, or, there are different options where we might be without the snowmobile. So I do actually carry a backup battery so that I can plug my phone into that if need be, if we're going to rely on that tracking. And then I'd be remiss to not talk about the interference. So, we are a walking, talking digital device basically at this point in time. This has been a great hot debate on the internet for some time and is heating up recently. If you're going to, oh, there we go. If you're going to have all these things on there, and I think that they're useful tools, you need to make sure that you are not trying to search with your transceiver when you have these tools close to you. So there should be a link that will come up in the chat if you want to reference the rest of this page. I just took a little small screenshot of that. So transceiver interference is real. When we're sending a signal, we turn our transceivers on to send and we're traveling around in the backcountry, we want to make sure that we have that a minimum of 20 centimeters away from anything that has an electronic capabilities, including like magnets and the mics of radios. So 20 centimeters. When we're searching, when we flick that thing to search, it needs to be at least 50 centimeters away from the searching transceiver. That has contributed to a number of incidents ending poorly in the last few years. The other thing that I'm going to talk about, because I'm a sled specific guy, if you're searching with your transceiver, you need to be at least 10 meters away from a running snowmobile. So you cannot, in this day and age, turn your transceiver on and again run the throttle and try and search with your transceiver. That's not gonna work. So it needs to be a minimum of 10 meters away. Same thing goes for calling for help. So you can't have your inReach in one hand and your transceiver in the other hand and expect the transceiver to work. So just make sure that I think we really have to be serious about this interference thing. It is a big, big deal. Okay. And it has some helpful measurements, which I think is really, really awesome. 20 centimeters, or hang loose, depending on which way you want to go. That's where I end, but I'll throw it out to the questions. Maybe Lisa can come back in and join me and we can answer some questions. I can stop sharing my screen. That might help too, eh? There we go.
It's pretty quiet right now. We don't have anything in the Q&A box at the moment, but it may just be that people are furiously typing. So perhaps we'll just give them a second and see if anyone's got anything they want to ask.
It just takes one, right? We need one.
All right, here we go. We have one. We have two. So Maya would like to know, if your InReach dies and you put in a fresh battery, does it still save your breadcrumbs?
Ooh. I honestly don't know.
So the one thing for an InReach is they don't run on batteries. They need to be charged.
Yeah.
And I
mean,
kind of feel like it does keep it, because I'm just thinking to all of our InReach. I was just looking at it today, and it has thousands of tracked breadcrumbs in there. So my feeling is yes, but I'm not 100% sure.
I think it would be interesting because I've done that to myself. I've accidentally turned off my Gaia on my phone. Um, and I'd just like to not admit that my phone ran out of batteries, but that's what happened. And I definitely it did not keep my tracks. So you do have to click save. The same thing goes for the rod command and the BRP Go. If you don't save those tracks when you shut it off, they're gone. So
okay.
yeah.
Sounds like it's definitely worth keeping an eye on that battery level then. And I know some people carry those little like charging box magic devices.
Yeah, that's what I carry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I think maybe one other thing that I would say just for that in specifically is, like, it's good to have a backup system as well. So kind of having two things, and maybe that your InReach is tracking, and then maybe one of your friends is tracking, and then hopefully not everybody's tracking, because that's usually going to burn your battery on your phone quite quickly. So oftentimes I'll be like, well, I'm going to track, you keep your phone for this or pictures or whatever, and then then we have a second backup for sure.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning as well, when you say pictures, often when you're out in the field with the field team, those pictures are work, like you're not just taking selfies, like they're important work pictures a lot of the time. Just made it sound like one selfie phone, one for everything else. Okay, the next question we have is from Bridie. It says, if you were going to choose one navigation app, which one would you go for?
We're
gonna have the same answer.
Are we? I don't
I don't
know.
know. I don't know.
I've been a long time Gaia user, and more recently I've been doing a lot more planning and using CalTopo. So it would definitely be between those two. One thing that I really like about those two is that you can use any file format, which I mentioned. And then a nice thing about CalTopo is just the trip planning that you can do with that. Like, you can literally plug in your leg 1, leg 2, leg 3, and it will like build you a trip plan. And then you can also create maps from that as well. So, and then it has an online app that's really gotten better in the last few years. So I'm starting to lean towards CalTopo, but Gaia has definitely been a longtime friend, I would say.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's the same thing. It's kind of a guy's comfort for me. I'm spreading out and maybe going into the Caltopo stuff. I really love Google Earth as well. I don't think it functions super well out of service in the field. It's certainly not trustworthy, in my opinion. But the combination of the pre-planning with the Google Earth or like a Caltopo, and then having the ability to put those maps onto the Gaia served me very, very, very well. Yeah.
Great. I love that. So the answer is choose one app is that you can't. I love it. Okay, we have more questions. Are the free versions, so sorry, Linda asked, are the free versions of FatMap and CalTopo adequate, or do you need extra? Or like she says also, does the premium Gaia is that recommended for most users as well?
Definitely the one thing with Gaia is it doesn't offer the slope angle shading without the premium version. And so that's a pretty key feature for digital tools. Like slope angle shading is a pretty nice to have, and Gaia is the one that only has that on the paid version.
I was an anti-pay for app guy for a long time, and I spent a few years being like, it's good enough without the premium. I can do it, but it's so worth it. It's worth it.
And I think one of the other really key features is downloading to your phone the maps, which is
Yeah.
also for almost all of the apps, you have to have that. And so if you can't work offline, then yeah, so it is kind of a tricky one for sure.
Nice. Linda also asked if we could just go over again the minimum distance to avoid between your transceiver and any other electrical devices.
20 centimeters when we're sending, 50 centimeters if we're searching. And if you're next to a running machine, 10 meters.
Yep. Also 10 for calling for help.
But it's easy. Don't do that next to your transceiver.
There you go. Yeah, and that if you go and look online at the page on the Avalanche Canada website, there is a really helpful little device that like I can't think of the words, mnemonic there to remember those distances. So it's like the hang twos and then like your arm distance. So
Yeah.
helpful stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why we teach when we're searching with our transceivers, we're not searching with our transceivers right here. It's we're giving that distance because there are things on us that we need to have on us, radios and so on and so forth. We just have to be aware where they are and that they could interfere. Don't ride your snowmobiles and search with avalanche transceivers, please.
Did you have anything you wanted to add to that one, Lisa?
I guess one thing I would add to that is really understanding what your transceiver does when it's being influenced by interference. I think like having really good practice with that and understanding that, oh, this is an interference thing. And that only comes when you have experience with your transceiver and you've tested it with many different things. And so not testing it to, again, try and use that stuff and think that interference doesn't exist, but testing it so that you know how your transceiver is reacting when it has interference.
Great, thank you both. And we have a question from Chris, and that says, does the BRP Go and the Polaris Ride Command app, and now the new Arctic Cat Garmin app, do we have any say at all on how those get manufactured? And I guess from AvCan's point of view, we don't really, but if you had something to say, would you have any advice on how to talk to those companies about any of that stuff?
Yeah, it's kind of like Coke versus Pepsi right now, which is a bit unfortunate. They currently don't speak to one another. That is something that as an industry, I think needs to happen. The technology exists. I know in the marine world, they all talk together, right? So I think that's where we're going, and I'll choose my words wisely. That's what I would say. How you can say that, talk to your dealer. Go to the dealer. Talk to the salespeople, talk to the sales manager. Um, I think there's really great technologies out there. I think it's really awesome that it's kind of the cutting edge in that world that way. And it's built right into the dash of your snowmobile. It doesn't get any easier than that, right? But yeah, I really love to see them talk. Steve, if you're watching this, I'd love to see them talk together.
Cool. Okay, I think that's all of the questions that we have in the Q&A box right now.
There's one there from Jeff about the eights
Oh, right, yeah.
ratings.
Okay, let me just have a quick look. Okay, I have an answer, sort of an answer for that, if that's okay. So the short answer to that, Jeff, is that I'm not sure. If you want to drop us an email to communications@avalanche.ca, I can do some digging on where those eights ratings might be and why they're missing, and I can let you know. But the short answer is that I don't know right now. Sorry about that.
I do think one of the reasons is because there is being some work being done on the version 2 of AIDS ratings. And I believe that's part of the reason why we're kind of looking at this momentary lapse in having AIDS ratings for the parks. Yeah.
Yeah, and just with that being in Parks Canada, we would need to probably check with them as well. Okay, cool. I think that really is all of them now. I scrolled actually to the bottom instead of halfway like I did last time. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for hanging out and answering questions and sharing all of that knowledge. It's been really helpful.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Just a couple of things. I'm going to share my screen again, and we just have a couple of bits to wrap up here. Sorry about this. Having a bit of an issue with Zoom. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so just want to thank the two guest hosts again for being such a great sports, and it's a really big topic, so I think it's really important that we acknowledge that we covered a lot of little things, but obviously there's a lot of other stuff to know. But it's been super interesting to learn everything we've learned tonight. These webinars that we host here are obviously great starting points, and they can be helpful additions to your avalanche safety know-how journey, but it's a lifelong thing and it doesn't stop here. The best way to keep training and keep learning is to take an Avalanche Canada training course. If you haven't taken one of those courses yet, an AST1 is absolutely a place to start. If you've already taken an AST1 and you're looking at spending more time in the backcountry, then maybe an AST2 is going to be right for you. There are loads of really good options as well that aren't a full AST. We have companion rescue skills training courses, and they are great for keeping your skills up to scratch and making sure that you can do the things you need to do to perform a rescue real quick. And if you need any kind of convincing about why those courses are helpful, check out the Cherry Bowl story at avalanche.ca. It's a great story of how it really was the difference between life and death when some people had taken that course. Another helpful course that you could take is managing avalanche terrain, and that gives your travel skills a tune-up. And you can take any of those courses as many times as you like to keep yourself sharp. We do recommend choosing an Avalanche Canada training course because they are all run by folks who are vetted by Avalanche Canada, and they all follow our world-leading curriculum. Be sure to make sure that your instructor is a licensed Avalanche Canada training provider, because we're proud of what we have to offer there. We have a great variety and diversity in our licensed providers, and we're sure that someone there will have a course that's right for you. In addition to training, there are loads of resources on our website to help you out and help you get started on your avalanche safety journey. You can start with AvSavvy, which is our online tutorial, and it's totally free. Find it at avalanche.ca. Okay, now for important things. Lisa is going to pull some names for some prize winners. We have some awesome stuff from Mammut. If you hear your name, send us an email at producer@avalanche.ca. Lisa, who have we got?
Yeah, great. We've got a few toques to give away tonight. The first prize, if looks like you're still here, it goes to Winnie Fu. It's this lovely black Mammut toque. Our second prize goes to Nisha Valix. Again, another lovely, very classy black Mammut toque. And then our third prize this evening is this awesome blue palm Mammut toque, and it goes to Bruce Watt.
Nice. Congratulations to all the winners. Yeah, so drop us an email at producer@avalanche.ca, and the link to that will be in the chat box as well. We appreciate your interest in avalanche safety. If you can afford it and you'd like to help AvCan by making a donation, you can use the link that's about to be in the chat box to donate, or you can scan the QR code that you should be seeing on your screen. You can support essential programs here at AvCan by donating as little as $10. Oh, sorry, I've just scrolled past where I should be here. That's not a problem. Okay, our next webinar is going to be on Wednesday, February 21st, and that's going to be our avalanche problems presentation with our forecaster, Simon Horton. This one is one of my favorite webinars that we do. We do it every year, and it's always super informative, and it's different every single time. So understanding the avalanche problem is a key aspect of understanding the danger rating and choosing the best terrain. And this webinar really gets into the bones of what we're looking for and what the problems are best, how to deal best with the problems. Pre-registration for that one is required. And again, you can find that on avalanche.ca. Thanks for everyone for coming out and showing an interest in avalanche safety. We hope you enjoy your winter in the backcountry, safe from avalanches. Good night.